It's not just James Cook when it comes to Buffalo Bills players that are ready for a contract extension. There are several others, and I'm going to break that down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, folks, welcome in. I want to talk about players on this Bills roster that are due for a pay bump. And of course, that includes James Cook, but there are other players as well, and I want to discuss them in addition to James Cook on this episode. And this offseason for the Buffalo Bills has been about adding some new talent. Joey Bosa, Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi, Josh Palmer. We know about those players. Certainly had an exciting draft class that is going to add to the mix. But really the story of the offseason for the Bills has been the contract extensions handed out. Josh Allen, big deal, right? Greg Rousseau, Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir, Christian Benford. A lot of contract extensions. Even some players that they retained, like a Ty Johnson and a Reggie Gilliam. And that was such a big conversation for like a year prior, where you knew all these guys were extension eligible, and we had a lot of conversations about how do you prioritize them, how do you make sure you get the right ones done. And the Bills obviously attacked it and got maybe even more done than some expected when you combine that with some of the free agent dollars they were also able to invest. And so I want to talk about the next wave of guys that are ready for a contract extension. And so that's what we're going to do here on this episode. I want to start with Conor McGovern, the Bills starting center. He's 27 years old. He's going to turn 28 in November. Free agent signing a couple of years ago. His first year in Buffalo, starting left guard, and then the big offensive line transition of releasing Mitch Morse and then taking Conor McGovern, sliding him over from left guard to center, taking David Edwards from the utility blocker role into that left guard role, and Conor McGovern seamlessly stepping into that center position was really important for the Bills offense last year. He made the Bills right about all of those dominoes. And you're probably like me, you came out of the 2023 season and thinking, boy, this offensive line was good. I wouldn't want to mess with it. And then the Bills messed with it, and you got a little nervous. But Conor McGovern made everything right. And the Bills came out and said that they believed it was his most natural position. Conor McGovern seemed to agree, and he was terrific as the Bills starting center last year, and he's going to get an opportunity this year to double down on that season. He wound up actually being a Pro Bowl alternate and getting to the Pro Bowl last year. So Conor McGovern is due for a pay bump. Now, he's still under contract this year, but a decision's going to have to be made here in the next however many months, right, between now and when the new league year opens. So what would a new deal for Conor McGovern look like? Well, the top of the center market is Creed Humphrey with the Chiefs at $18 million a season. But I think there are two other deals that recently came through that give us the right foundation for where to start this conversation as it relates to Conor McGovern. Cam Jurgens with the Eagles just signed a contract extension that pays him $17 million a season. And Drew Dahlman, who was with the Falcons, signed a free agent deal with the Bears that pays him $14 million a season. I think when we talk Conor McGovern contract extension, that $14 million a year mark speaks pretty loudly to me. Maybe even that $14 to $17 million a year range. That's what makes sense. It's a healthy amount of money. Obviously, Conor McGovern, that would be a nice bump for him based on what he originally signed with in Buffalo. And Conor McGovern was on a podcast with Cover One, Anthony Prohaska and Eric Turner, the Cover One film room. And at the end of the episode, the guys asked him about getting a deal done in Buffalo. And Conor McGovern said some things that didn't necessarily give me the warm fuzzies about where this is heading. He said initially when he came to Buffalo, he left money on the table to go to the Bills. He felt like it was a good fit for him. But then he said, look, we've had some conversations since the end of the season. Those have been tabled. He'd love to stay in Buffalo, but he acknowledged that sometimes business can get in the way of something like that. So we'll see how it goes, but not necessarily a message that makes you feel super good about it getting done. And obviously, based on these deals at center with Humphrey and then, of course, Juergens and Dahlman, this center position is becoming more and more expensive. The market's moving up, and Conor McGovern is in line to receive a pretty nice contract that I think will come in between $14 and $17 million a season. So why would you do it? Why would you extend Conor McGovern? Well, performance, first of all, right? He's been a good starter for you. Then you think about this offensive line and the makeup of it, and you can look at the pillars. Well, first of all, it's the tackles, Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins. Those are your pillars, but Conor McGovern at center is a nice pillar. And you'd love to keep that intact, right? Continuity matters most at offensive line, and the Bills have been very fortunate from an injury perspective over the last two seasons. And with the personnel, guys staying on the team that they could really build and develop and grow. And obviously the line took a huge step forward in 2023 and took another step in 2024. You'd like to keep that intact, right? What could be more important than keeping this offensive line together in front of Josh Allen for protection purposes, but also what it's meant for the run game? So yeah, it's pretty obvious why you'd want to keep him around. Durable, good player. There's the chemistry piece with Josh Allen. That center is very important for setting protections, and the center and the quarterback have to be on the same page for what those protection calls are going to be and the communication. You want to keep that going, right? You don't want to have to enter 2026 with a new center in front of Josh Allen. And given McGovern's age at 27, turning 28 in November, you're not really concerned with any type of decline. You'd like to think he's got several good seasons ahead of him. Not to mention, it feels like Conor McGovern has become a big part of the culture with the pizza nights that he hosts and has really become a teammate that everyone seems to speak pretty highly of. There's endless reasons why the Bills should get this done. The other side of that is, well, why not? Why would they maybe consider not extending Conor McGovern? Well, Osiris Torrance, I think, is part of that conversation. And we're going to talk about Osiris Torrance in the next segment. But with both of your tackles being handsomely paid, can you also pay Torrance and McGovern, or do you have to choose? And how do you choose? Can you have 4 highly paid starters on your offensive line? Do you think about the pipeline that has been established with guys like Alec Anderson and Cedric Van Pran Granger and think, well, you have an opportunity to reset with somebody that's been around, that's not completely foreign to what we do, and have an economic option for a little bit? These are the hard decisions that Brandon Beane is going to have to ask himself. So really the reasons why wouldn't really have anything to do with McGovern as a player and his value and importance. It would be just about balancing out your roster in terms of spending and if it's the right idea to lean into younger and cheaper options at the position. That's why they pay Brandon Beane the big bucks, but I want to at least break down the dynamics with you here today on this episode. We're going to do the same thing for Osiris Torrance. Coming up next, we'll talk James Cook as well, plus another starter and a few wild cards. Folks, be sure to stick with me. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. I've enjoyed these playoffs. I've been getting in on a lot of the prop bets. Before the game, I'm enjoying the over-under on point totals. I've been hitting some overs on Karl Anthony Towns. That's been working out for me quite a bit. And some of the team over-unders as well have been fun to check out. So we got the conference finals and make them even more exciting by getting in on some action over at FanDuel. I've also been enjoying some of the baseball bets where you can like pick certain players that are going to have like 2+ total bases and different props there as well. So it's a lot of fun. Watching sports is even better when you have some action over at FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it is the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, folks, let's talk about Osiris Torrance. Now, first of all, Osiris Torrance has 2 more years left on his deal. He's got the 2025 season and the 2026 season, and he's not even contract extension eligible until after this year. Just for a point of information, rookies, you have to play 3 seasons and then you can get a contract extension. So until you've played 3 seasons, you're not eligible for a contract extension. But we saw that become a thing for Khalil Shakir, Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford, right? After year 3, you go ahead and get that done. And there's always incentive to get contracts done as early as possible because the cap goes up, contracts go up. It would behoove the team every time that as soon as you identify that they're your guy to get it done as quickly as you can because the price typically only goes up. So Osiris Torrance is very relevant because after this season, he's going to be eligible and there's going to be a lot to consider with that and how you consider other contracts as well. Like we've already kind of talked about with Conor McGovern. Like there's impact to the McGovern conversation to the Torrance conversation. So Torrance, second-round pick in 2023, started every game for the Bills over the last 2 years, 25 years old. He's going to turn 26 in January. What would a deal look like for Osiris Torrance? Well, I've alluded to this several times on this podcast that the guard market is booming. Booming. Robert Hunt, $20 million a year. Aaron Banks, $19.25 per year. Sam Cosmi, $18.5 with Washington. Will Fries went from the Colts to the Vikings this offseason at $17.5 million a season. Osiris Torrance is 100% on the trajectory of those players. If Osiris Torrance has the year I think he will in year 3, which has been a very common year for Bills draft picks to really break out, and we're talking about a guy that has 2 years of starting experience with good players on either side of him. This is going to be every bit of $15 million a year or more. And that's expensive. That's very expensive. That's a highly paid starter. So why would you do it? Why wouldn't you do it? Well, I think number one, why is that the Bills have committed to a philosophy of draft, develop, and re-sign. And not on every occasion does that work out. Sometimes a Tremaine Edmonds type deal comes through and it just, hey, it's not really going to work out based on what everyone's priorities are. But for the most part, the Bills extend their good players that they draft. And Osiris Torrance fits into that. He's been durable. He's been available. He's young and ascending. I think there's meat on the bone for Osiris Torrance to continue to improve and deliver an even greater impact to what he's given this team already. And I think there's a conversation about how the guard play in Buffalo has finally stabilized. It took a lot of time. We went through this laundry list of guards, whether it's John Feliciano or Spencer Long or Cody Ford or Quentin Spain, Brian Winters, Darrell Williams, Ike Bucker, Ryan Bates, Roger Saffold, Vlad Dukas, if you want to go way back into the archives. But it's been this revolving door at guard, and you finally draft one that hits. Might want to keep that guy around, right? So a lot of reasons to extend Osiris Torrance. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, it's the cost. It's a very similar conversation to what we had with Conor McGovern. Can you pay both Torrance and McGovern? Should you pay them both? And if you can't pay them both, which one do you go with? Do you go with the young player that you've drafted and has stabilized your guard play? Or do you go with the center, which is arguably the more important position for your offensive line? It's not easy to figure out. I will also say this about Osiris Torrance. I think he's a very good run blocker, and I think he's a good starter in general, but I do think that he's a guy in pass protection where there are still warts. He's not a super nimble guy in terms of lateral quickness, and so sometimes staying in front of those twitchy, quick interior pass rushers is difficult for him. And whenever you watch opposing defenses go against the Bills, whenever they want to kind of stress the communication and overload, they attack Osiris Torrance. So I think from both a mental side, a communication side, a technique side, there's room for him to become a better player in pass protection. I'll say this, though. This season, I think, is going to provide the clarity that we're looking for as to what the Bills should do with Osiris Torrance and Conor McGovern. You'd love to keep them both. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you should. So we'll see what happens. All right, we do have to talk about James Cook. I promise I won't exhaust this conversation. We've been through it a number of times. But James Cook's 25, turns 26 in September. Breakout season in 2023 where he gave this offense over 1,500 yards from scrimmage. And then last year, over 1,200 yards from scrimmage and 18 touchdowns. What does a contract extension for James Cook look like? Well, we've talked about the big names. Barkley's at $20.6 million a season. McCaffrey's at 19. Derrick Henry just signed for 15. Jonathan Taylor's at 14. Alvin Kamara's at 12 and a quarter. Josh Jacobs is at 12. I went through this literally on yesterday's podcast where I think you have to look at this through percentage of cap. 4.5% of cap is right between what Josh Jacobs and James Conner got. That gets you to $12.5 million a year. Offer the man a 4-year, $50 million contract and say, take it or leave it. That's what I would do. That's what I would do if I were Brandon Beane. And, of course, James Cook has made it known that he wants 15. Okay, well, we don't see it the same way. So why would you do it? Well, it's the explosive running ability that James Cook has. Not only does he gain huge chunks with explosive runs, but his speed dynamic that he offers doesn't always equate to a 20-yard run or a 15-yard run, but it does take runs that might be 1 or 2 yards and they're 5 or 6 yards because he can corner the defense and get around people. His explosive element matters a ton. He's also fits into the same conversation I had about Osiris Torrance, where you've committed to draft developing and re-signing. Well, what a great story this James Cook thing has been as a niche player coming out of Georgia, as really profiled as a pass catching back. He's developed into your primary ball carrier that has grown in terms of vision, that has grown in terms of how he runs stylistically, that has given your team production, has overcome fumbling issues, has cleaned up his drops for the most part. Like, there's been a tremendous growth. So draft, develop, re-sign certainly applies to James Cook. You love the growth, and he gives you pass catching ability. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, the contract demands and being on the same page for evaluation of the deal. That would be a big reason, but also replaceability. Running back production in the NFL is not hard to find. Does it make sense with an expensive roster to commit 4.5%, 5% of your cap to a running back? It's a fair question to ask. And you know surely James Cook and whatever running back benefits from Josh Allen being the quarterback and the run blocking and scheme that exists in front of him. And so if the Bills were to move on from James Cook, for me, it wouldn't be about going out and finding another guy that can touch the ball 250 times. I don't know if you need that. I think you can absorb a lot of the touches to Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. I think what you'd be looking for is who can restore the explosive elements, right? The big play ability that James Cook gives you. Because I think the Bills' offense benefits from this approach that they've had of a 50% James Cook, 25% Ray Davis, 25% Ty Johnson workload. I think, and the backs benefit from that as well. And you saw James Cook being able to be fresh and down the stretch for the Bills that this past year, where against Denver he was awesome in the playoffs, against Kansas City he was awesome in the playoffs, and you want that. Now that doesn't help their argument for pay, but it certainly helps them with durability and obviously the Bills and having backs that are fresh all season long. So there's a lot of layers in play with the James Cook piece. All right, there's another starter we got to talk about, plus a few wild cards. We'll do that here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about another starter here that kind of overlooked in these conversations as it relates to Bills that are due for a pay bump. That's David Edwards, the Bills' starting left guard. David Edwards is 28. He's going to turn 29 in March. Was a draft pick of the Rams and started for his first 3 years with the Rams. And then in 2022, he was limited to just 4 games. He started all 4 of them, but he had a couple of different injuries, mainly a concussion. Then he signs in Buffalo, where he reunites with Aaron Kromer. And in 2023, his first season in Buffalo, he was the utility blocker, right? He was the Alec Anderson player. And then he moves into the starting lineup in 2024 as the starting left guard. And he signed a 2-year, $6 million deal ahead of the 2024 season. And of course, this is the last year of his deal. So what would a contract extension for David Edwards look like? Well, I don't think he's in the Osiris Torrance stratosphere of pay, but I think he's in the sufficient level starter bucket of pay. And we've seen those deals happen. Recently, John Simpson signed for $6 million a year. Jermaine Illuminor with the Giants at $7 million. Ben Bredesen with the Buccaneers at $7.3. Nick Allegretti went from the Chiefs to the Commanders and signed for $5.3 million. Point being is I think you would look at David Edwards' next deal to be north of $5 million a season. You could see like a 2-year, $6 million deal, something like that. Or 2 years, $12 million, 2 years, $11 million, something like that, I think would be on the low end of what I think he would get paid. So why would you do it? Why would you extend David Edwards? Well, this guy's got tremendous football IQ. Played quarterback in high school. Actually went to Wisconsin to play tight end and then switched to right tackle, if I'm not mistaken. He sees the game a little bit differently, and we've kind of picked that up through different listening to other media commentary and the players doing film work. You could tell that David Edwards means a lot to the IQ and communication of the offensive line. Listening to Conor McGovern and Deion Dawkins talking about him. I would also say stability with Deion Dawkins. Dawkins has even said this out loud, where there's not been a lot of years where the guy next to him at left guard is the same player from the previous year. And you've seen Deion Dawkins just play at a higher and higher level as he ages. And I certainly think it's beneficial to him to have some stability next to him. I also think that David Edwards is a sufficient level starter that won't cost you very much. Now, I'm not saying that $5 or $6 or $7 million a year isn't much, but it's also not 18 or 20 million that you're seeing the top end guards getting. And then I would also shout out offensive line continuity. You want as much of this in place as possible, and David Edwards is a pathway to achieving that. Why wouldn't you do it? Well, David Edwards is a good player. He's not a great player. He's not a high-level performer. Sufficient is the word that you would go to describe the caliber of player that David Edwards is as a starter. And I think because of that, you get into the same replaceability conversation that you would have with other players and feel like maybe you do have a pipeline that exists with the same names: Alec Anderson, Cedric Van Pran Granger. Tylen Grable is the name that I keep going back to. I'm high on Tylen Grable. I thought he was unbelievable in the preseason last year, and he won the swing tackle job a couple of times. And while he's been really a tackle, from a size and athleticism perspective, he's really the exact same size as David Edwards. I mean, literally in every imaginable way. So I think he's got the body type that the Bills are okay with at guard. And, you're talking about, if you were to assume the starting position in 2026, you'd have 2 years on a late round deal as one of your starters while you're paying either or maybe even both Torrance and McGovern. Might be a pathway to kind of balancing things out economically. So that's why you wouldn't do it. So we'll see how that one plays out. The wild cards here are two players that would be extension eligible after the season. They're not quite yet, but they fall into that, was the 2023 draft class. The Dalton Kincaid, Osiris Torrance, Dorian Williams, right? Those are the top 3 picks. So there's only 3 picks. The Bills only picked 6 players in 2023. It was Kincaid, Torrance, Williams, and then Nick Broker, Alex Austin, and somebody else whose name escapes me right now. Justin Shorter, actually, is who it is. And those 3 players, Shorter, Broker, and Austin, are on other teams now. And so your only players left are the first 3 picks: Williams, Kincaid, and Torrance. So we've already kind of talked a lot about Torrance, and I don't want to get quite into the Dorian Williams and Dalton Kincaid conversation, because I think those players are guys that we just need to learn a lot about this year. But Dorian Williams, he's eligible after this season. And what will we learn? So far, I thought we've seen great growth from year 1 to year 2. I've even said that I think Dorian Williams was the most improved player on the team year over year from his rookie season in 23 to what he did in 2024. But what are we going to learn about him this year? Ideally, Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano are healthy for the whole year, and you don't get to see much of Dorian Williams outside of when the Bills go with 3 linebackers or when he plays and makes impact on special teams. I think with Dorian Williams, it's probably a situation where if Milano leaves after the season, now you are looking at Dorian Williams in line to start in 2026. And then what does that tape tell you about what level of commitment you need to have to him beyond his rookie deal? So we got a lot to learn about Dorian Williams, and I'm not sure how much we're going to learn this year. I hopefully we don't learn much at all. In the case of Dalton Kincaid, we need to see this year, but that conversation is going to heat up. He'll be eligible after the season, and the Bills have the opportunity to pick up his 5th-year option. They'll have to make that choice by early May 2026. But is Dalton Kincaid going to be a dude, a mismatch player, a critical piece of this offense? I think we'll find out this year. And I think that's what's going to shape these conversations once we get more information on Kincaid and Williams. So big year for a lot of these guys. Big decisions coming for Brandon Beane. Hopefully this conversation was helpful for you to understand the dynamics in play for all of these players that are due for a bump or become contract extension eligible in the very near future. All right, folks, that's it for today on the podcast. I do appreciate you being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills! And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.